Oh,
Earl Culver, District 4.
okay.
Ronnie Masters.
James Rouse, District 9.
Thomas Atkins, District 8.
Okay. So, seeing as we now have a quorum, it appears that in the past, how we have conducted these meetings, the policies procedures manual has been updated to reverse the policy to where the administrator is now going to be the person who handles the city's case. So we will be the final arbiter before it goes to either the commission or to Superior Court. Those were the old rules before they changed them to the new rules, I think back in 2018. I don't believe we've had a case now in over 2 years. And I was not actually aware that the commission had amended the procedure for the personnel board in the most updated policy procedures manual. Does anyone have any questions? All right. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to perform the is the claimant here? I can't see.
Yes, I am.
Okay. I can't see you, sir. That's all right. Are you represented by counsel?
I am not.
Okay. All right. So, Mr. Hagner, is that how we spell? Is that how we say your name?
Hagner, yes.
Yeah, Hagner. Yeah, Mr. Hagner. All right. So what we do, I'm going to give you a brief description of what we do.
Okay.
So what we will do is we will hear first from the city as to why you were let go or whatever the issue is. The city will have 5 minutes to make an opening statement. You will have 5 minutes to make an opening statement. We will then proceed with the city will then present their case back to us. They will have approximately about 30 minutes with an allowance of about 15, with an extra 15 or so minutes to present their case. You will then turn around and rebut. You can rebut their case, but you've got to have, but evidence provided will only be, is going to be relevant. Well, you can only provide relevant evidence to your case. Once those are completed, and the board in the past can ask questions, but they'll be subject through the chair. Once that's completed, both sides will have roughly 5 minutes to conclude their argument. We will then enter into executive session and render a decision, which you will be notified in writing of the board's decision within 5 days.
Okay.
You have any questions for us?
Not at this time.
Okay. All right. With that, we also need, Mr. Hagner, do you have any witnesses?
I do not have witnesses present. I have letters of support that I will be.
Okay. All right. That's fine. We can address those at the time.
Okay.
Counselor, do you have any witnesses for the city? You're on mute. There
okay. Yes. Augusta has 3 witnesses.
We do. Okay. So will you be the officer that will swear those can you be the officer to swear those witnesses in?
Yes, I will be.
Okay, all right. And you will handle, how will you be representing, you'll be representing the city and the city alone, is that correct?
Yes, only Augusta, Georgia as the employer.
Okay, all right. All right, Ms. Smith, go ahead and administer the oath to the witnesses, and then we'll sequester them, and you can call them as you need to.
Okay, well, are they on the screen? Are they in the witness room?
A private room currently, and then I'm gonna call them in individually to do their.
Can I just swear them in as they testify? Is that okay?
That's totally fine. That's totally fine.
Okay.
So
Okay.
with that said, do you wish to go ahead and make an opening statement?
Yes, I would.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Janice Smith, and I'm the attorney for the employer, Augusta, Georgia. The evidence presented to you today by the employer will show that Mr. Hagner, who had been employed as a deputy director of Augusta's Recreation and Parks Department for 6 years, one, knew or should have known that the security cameras at the maintenance shop yard on Lumpkin Road were not functioning properly, if not completely non-functioning. Two, in light of these circumstances, Mr. Hagner did not take the necessary steps to ensure the cameras were working properly. Three, that approximately $33,000 worth of Augusta equipment was stolen on 2 separate occasions under his supervision within a 13-month period at the same location. 4, when not including these thefts, Mr. Hagner still could not account for all of the inventory under his supervision prior to his termination. 5, that he was not aware of Augusta's loss prevention policy until July of this year, although he had been employed as the deputy director for 6 years. And 6, after thefts occurred at the maintenance shop yard, he shifted responsibility on his subordinates and others rather than accepting any accountability for the loss of $33,000 worth of Augusta property within a 13-month period at the same location that was under his supervision. Although Mr. Hagner may try to convince you otherwise today at this hearing, but the evidence will clearly show that it was his mismanagement and lack of responsibility, accountability, and leadership that led to his termination as the deputy director of the Augusta's Recreation and Parks Department. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hagner, do you wish to open with a statement, please, sir?
Yes, good afternoon, and thank you again for taking the time and willingness to hear my side. As Ms. Smith said, I had been employed for over 6 years as the deputy director within the Recreation and Parks Department. I've had 0 warnings, disciplinary measures of any kind in my file. I have been working diligently to constantly improve the overall conditions there, as well as the level of the staff that we have, the level of the equipment that we have, the level of security that we have within the facility. And I think you'll see on my side that there are ample efforts made on my part on behalf of the city to get us to a better place.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hagner. Ms. Smith, I'll let you go ahead and you can start and present your case.
Okay, the employer would like to call Mr. Jarvis Sims to testify.
Okay. Someone get Mr. Sims in the room. Thank you.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, good
Hello.
afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Sims, will you please raise your right hand and repeat after me? I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
Swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
Okay. You may be seated. Mr. Sims, will you please state your full name for the record?
Sure. My name is Jarvis R. Sims.
And where do you work?
I work for Augusta, Richmond County.
And how long have you been employed with Augusta?
I've been employed with Augusta for 2 years and 2 months.
What is your current position?
My current role, I serve as the interim administrator.
And how long have you been in that position?
I was promoted to this position in April of 2019. 15 months.
Okay. As the interim administrator, what role do you play in disciplinary appeals for Augusta employees?
In this capacity, for employees who are non-probationary, these employees have a right, if they are disciplined via termination or any disciplinary action, they have a right for an appeal, administrative appeal. And at that point, I can uphold the appeal decision made, I can change the decision made, or I can modify this decision made.
Okay. Are you familiar with the termination of Mr. Hagner?
Yes, I am.
Okay. I'm going to share a document with you, Mr. Sims. Hopefully we will not have any technical difficulties. The host has disabled participant screen sharing.
You should be good to go now.
Okay.
Try it again.
All right. On the document. Okay, maybe I have too many documents open.
Yes, ma'am. Just make sure you have the document open first and then try to share it.
Okay. It's open, but it's not showing up on my screen. But I have a lot of documents open, so let me try to close some stuff. I'm sorry, bear with me. I guess I'll do it this way. That's the wrong document.
And this is why Zoom don't work.
There we go. Mr. Hagner, can you see this document?
I can.
Okay. All right, counsel.
Ms. Smith, you're on mute.
Ms. Smith, you're on mute.
I think you're gonna have to read it to us, I don't think you can see it.
Should be in the bottom left corner. Should be a mute button. And then I'm hitting ask to unmute. So you should see a little pop-up that says the host has asked you to
Okay.
unmute. There you go.
Yeah, but I've lost the, well, whatever, we'll keep going. Okay.
We can see the document.
Okay, Administrator Sims, have you seen this document before?
Yes, I have.
And can you please describe this document to the board and to everyone?
Was the response to the appeal from myself to Mr. Hagner.
And can you tell us today what led to your decision to uphold the termination of Gary Hagner?
Sure. My decision was based on reviewing the disciplinary file provided by the HR department. And then in that file, I carefully reviewed the department's decisions, the job description, as well as our PPPM policy. I also took in consideration Mr. Gary Hagner's leadership role serving as the deputy director. And in this role, in his capacity, he is one of our senior leaders in one of our largest departments within our organization. And we would expect for him to enforce policies, procedures. We would also expect for him to understand and protect our assets as well as operations. Also took in consideration, there were 2 thefts that had occurred within over 13 months, thefts exceeding almost $33,000. Also took in consideration when Mr. Hagner was interviewed by our risk management department, he indicated he was not familiar with Augusta's loss prevention policy. And I found that to be quite alarming, knowing that he is the deputy director in one of our largest departments. Also, I thought his response as far as our policies, he indicated or did not take any accountability in his role as a deputy director. And again, I thought that was very alarming for his role. So all of those factors I took into consideration when I made the decision to uphold the department's decision.
Thank you, Mr. Sims. I don't have any further questions for this witness right now, unless Mr. Hagner has a cross.
Mr. Hagner, do you have, do you wish to offer anything?
No, I'll wait for my turn.
Okay. All right, we can, do you need your next witness?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Sims. So the next witness will be Kendra Sturgis.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Jeff, are you on the line?
Yes, I'm here.
I'm having a technical difficulty, so once I started trying.
I can run over there and help you, okay?
Okay, thanks.
I'll be there in a second.
No,
Thank you.
he's a deputy administrator, but he's currently serving as
Yeah, the deputy director, his name pops up as Gary Hagner. He doesn't show, he's got his camera off, so when he speaks.
Well, we shouldn't have the camera off, so
Hey, Gary,
yes.
the personnel board can't see you. Your camera's not on.
Well, let's see. Let's try that. Is it on now?
Yeah, there it is. There it is.
All right. Sorry about that. I didn't realize that was on my end.
Well, I think I'm ready. I actually figured it out. So we can go ahead with Ms. Sturgis.
Okay.
Are we calling another witness?
Yes, Ms.
Mr.
Sturgis.
Sturgis.
Mm-hmm.
Can you see?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Hello, Ms. Sturgis. Can you please raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. Ms. Sturgis, can you please state your full name for the record?
Kendra Keshonda Sturgis.
And where do you work?
I am employed with Augusta, Richmond County in the finance department as a senior accountant.
And how long have you been employed with Augusta?
I was hired on June 13th of 2018.
And what is your current position?
Current position, senior accountant.
And what are your job responsibilities in your current position?
As senior accountant, I have been assigned accounts to include the sheriff department, federal and state drug fund, and capital outlay are the funds that I help the departments maintain their budget for.
Okay. Do you know whether security cameras for recreation and parks was an approved capital project for fiscal year 2020?
For fiscal year,
Yes.
fiscal year 2020, the security cameras was listed as an approved project for recreation for fiscal year 2020. Yes.
And do you know when those funds would have been made available for the purchase of the security cameras?
The capital allocations were made available to departments on March 3rd of 2020.
Okay. And do you know whether Recreation and Parks ever requested capital outlay funds for security cameras prior to fall of 2020? I'm sorry, fall of 2019.
I can only attest to fall of 2018, and that's when the budget for the fiscal year 2019 would have been requested. As of fall 18, no, security cameras were not requested. Anything prior to fall of 18 predates my employment with the city, so I would not personally have that information.
Okay. I don't have any further questions for this witness.
Okay. Mr. Hagner, do you have anything?
No.
Well, thank you, Ms. Sturgis.
Okay. Thank you.
And the employer will call its final witness, Mr. McDowell.
What's that? Right here?
Hello, Ms. McDowell. Will you please raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth and the whole truth, so help you God?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Ms. McDowell, I'm sorry?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay,
Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Okay. Please state your full name for the record.
Maurice Donnell McDowell.
And where do you work?
Currently, I serve as the interim deputy director for the city of Augusta, deputy administrator, excuse me, for the city of Augusta, but as well as the Parks and Recreation director.
And how long have you been employed with Augusta?
Since July the 23rd, 2011.
Okay. And I think you may have stated this, but just to make it clear for the record, what is your current position?
Parks and Recreation director.
Okay. And how long have you been in that position?
Since September the 5th, 2020.
Are you familiar with the former employee Gary Hagner?
I am.
And what position did Mr. Hagner hold while employed with Augusta?
Deputy director in the Parks and Recreation department, deputy director of Parks and Maintenance.
And what were his duties and responsibilities as a deputy director?
It's a pretty large division. Had a budget a little over $2 million. So the gist of it was of course, oversaw the budget for the Parks and Maintenance division, making sure our parks and grounds and outdoor facilities are taken care of in terms of grass cutting, cleaning restrooms, as well as some of the mediums throughout the city. That was the Parks and Recreation responsibility. He would oversee that as well. Our cemeteries, that falls under the deputy director of parks as well. And then the management of a few contracts. I think we had the marina, just to give an example of one. So it was a pretty big and significant operation within the Parks and Recreation department.
Okay. Did you make the decision to terminate Mr. Hagner's employment with Augusta?
Unfortunately, I had to make that decision. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'm going to show you a document, Mr. McDowell.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. McDowell, can you see the document that's on the screen?
Yes,
I may
ma'am.
have to move it down a little bit. It's a 2-page. It's actually a 3-page document.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Are you familiar with this document?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I want to point out to you. Are you aware that this document contains 2 typos?
Yes, hindsight is always 50-50, and it was brought to our attention. But as the director over there, I definitely take full responsibility for it. Our staff, but yes, we apologize for those 2 errors in the document, but I'm aware of them, absolutely.
And just so that it can be clear for the record, can you point, or do you know where the 2 typos are located?
I think one had to do with timing of the date. I think we put 12 months and it should have read 13 months.
Okay. Well, if you could give me 1 second, Mr. McDowell. So if you look at page 2, and I believe it's in the 2nd paragraph.
Right, where it reads, this is the second theft occurring at 2027 Lumpkin Road within a 12-month period. Of course, if you trace that date back to June, and then we had most recent theft in July, of course, that's 13 months and not 12. I think what happened there is by the time we did the reporting, if you look at that June 30th date, it actually bled over to July. So the thought process was 12 months, but technically it's 13 months by a day, I guess.
And do you know where there's possibly another typo in this document?
Yes, I think the word is operable, and it should read inoperable. Looking at this document, I can't remember exactly which page. It may be on the last page. But I would say if you look at the 3 pages here in this particular document in totality, you will understand, at least you will be able to ascertain what the intent was. But yes, there is a typo. I think it reads operable. I think it in reference to the security cameras where it should read inoperable for a length of time.
And I believe that must be the third paragraph on page 2.
Absolutely. Yes, I think you are correct.
And I'm gonna ask you one more question about this document. If you go to page 3, this is the last page of the document, and on the signature line, that's your name, correct, Mr. McDowell?
Right.
This document, it doesn't have a signature. Can you explain to us why that is the case?
Yes, and that's not the original copy that you have. Of course, Mr. Hagner has the original copy based on our review as I called him in to have the discussion. So typically what happened here, we presented the document to Mr. Hagner. I had a meeting with him to go over the document in totality, and the thought process there were to sign it where it shows the director signed it as well as the employee to acknowledge the recipient of this letter. However, during our, I guess you would call it interview, Mr. Hagner, as you could well understand, this is a very emotional time when you're making these type of decisions and it impacts livelihood. So Mr. Hagner became a little belligerent, and my concern was that the meeting was getting out of hand based on a series of questions he was asking. He was asking about the process. He was asking about documents that I was trying to let him know that you will have to do an open record request, so you can, you got an appeal process you can go through. You can get your hands on all those documents. He was demanding them at the time, and of course I didn't have them. So rather than allowing that meeting to escalate out of control, of course we had the marshal department there, we had an officer there. So out of abundance of caution, we decided to abruptly end that meeting just because the emotions had gotten at a level that was beyond control. And at that time, Mr. Hagner got those documents that was actually presented to him. He left his cell phone, he left his keys. He asked could he run up to his office and grab a couple of personal items. So we never got to the opportunity where we would have, if that meeting had went accordingly, for me to sign as well as for Mr. Hagner to sign.
Okay. Well, let's get into the substance of Mr. Hagner's termination. What circumstances led to your decision to terminate Mr. Hagner?
Well, we've had in the department a series of thefts, and the most recent theft, which was dated, I think in July of this year, that sort of was the catalyst to get most of this process started. So I asked at that time for risk management, of course, as our entity that does these sort of internal reviews and investigations. I asked for them to do that investigation and then provide me with documentation of those interviews, as well as the investigation process. And then during that period of time, I reviewed those documents, which led me to make a decision that I had to make. So I relied heavily on that investigation, that internal review, in making my decision.
Well, Mr. McDowell, did you review any documents? And I think you did spoke that you reviewed some documents before you made this decision. I'm going to present you with a series of documents, and I want to know if you're familiar with these documents.
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay, new share. Can you see the document that I have?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And have you ever seen this document before?
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm just gonna move it down. It is a 4-page document. Can you explain to us what this document is?
That is the police report from the July 21st, 2020 theft that occurred over at our maintenance shop at our Parks and Recreation Department.
And I'm gonna point you to, I believe it is the 4th page of the document.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there any information, or did you rely on any of the information that was contained in the sheriff's office report when making your decision?
Absolutely. Particular to that highlighted section there on that document, it was documented by the officer. There was no video evidence. And the reason that's highlighted and the reason that stands out is we have security cameras that is supposed to be operating and monitoring that particular maintenance facility. And so it was troublesome, or at least startling, that the officer, because during his investigation, one assumption would be quite naturally to ask for any type of surveillance to help us, capture whomever was responsible for the theft. You can see the cameras, so obviously the officer did see the cameras, but also in doing that investigation, obviously it was to him that the cameras weren't working, and so he notated that in his document, which for me raised all kind of red flags.
I'm gonna show you another document, Mr. McDowell. Okay. Do you see this document appears to be an email?
Yes, ma'am.
Have you ever seen this document before?
Yes, ma'am.
And can you tell us what this document is?
This is an email from Risk Management, pretty much outlining and detailing that most recent theft that we had over in Parks and Recreation, as well as highlighting some other issues related to theft that had occurred earlier, years prior to. And I think at that time, Risk Management was making me aware of previous thefts, the most recent theft, which was in July, as well as one that was roughly 13 months prior to. And then I think at that time, that's also part of our risk management assessment and review with Mr. Hagner.
And I'm going to show you another document. And Mr. McDowell, I'm just gonna, for the record, this is a 3-page document. This is the 1st page. Can you tell us, have you ever seen this document before?
Yes, ma'am. If that's a copy from our 3 p.m., that is our loss prevention policy. That's in our 3 p.m. manual. That is our expectation. I say the city is for each employee to review it, but definitely anyone in leadership capacity must familiarize themselves with the totality of that 3 p.m., but definitely loss prevention if you're responsible for maintaining equipment, anything in terms of the value or assets for your responsibility. You should know this policy and you should be very familiar with this policy because you would be responsible for those subordinates understanding this policy and how this policy relates to them as well as yourself.
Okay. And did you consider this document when making your decision to terminate Mr. Hagner?
Yes, ma'am, I did, based upon a response that Mr. Hagner gave to risk management when they was interviewing him. They asked him the question, was he familiar with the 3 p.m. Loss prevention policy?
His response was no. Again, as Deputy Director of Parks and Recreation, where you have a wealth of assets, he should. The expectation is for him to know this policy. If he's going to hold those subordinates accountable to the same policy, he first got to know the policy himself.
Okay. Mr. McDowell, I'm going to show you a few more documents. I think we have 3 more. Let me close this one out. Okay, Mr. McDowell, can you see this new document?
Yes, ma'am, I can.
Okay, just so that everyone can see that it is a 2-page document. Can you please, well, one, are you familiar with this document?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
And did you consider this document when making your decision to terminate Mr. Hagner?
Yes, ma'am, heavily. A couple of things stood out to me. Number one, the question highlighted there, are you familiar with the loss prevention policy of the 3 p.m.? Mr. Hagner's response was no, not until you provided it to me today. Again, someone in Mr. Hagner's position as Deputy Director of Parks and Maintenance Division, where you have a budget over $2 million, you have a wealth of assets that you're responsible for, and for you not to acknowledge or take some responsibility in the prevention of loss of taxpayers, hard paid, hard taxes, assets that we are fortunate to make these purchases from. I find that very startling and disturbing, given his role with organization. He's not a layman, he's not a groundskeeper, he's a deputy director who's next in line if the department director's not there, and for him to answer no, not until today. And Mr. Gary's tenure has been with the city since August of 2014. So he's been with the organization roughly 6 years or better. And in 6 years, if he hadn't stumbled across this policy with the number of thefts and things that we've had in terms of inventory in that department, and he hadn't familiarized himself with that, that's a problem. That's a huge problem, because he would be the one to ensure that his staff and his subordinates understand this policy and how that could lead to their termination and employment with the city of Augusta.
Okay. And was there anything else in this document that you relied upon when making your decision?
Yeah, I find it disturbing in his response that, it's pretty much the employee's responsibility. They are to check in and out equipment daily, but then the buck stops there with the employees. So there's no accountability and responsibility that Mr. Hagner will want to take on in his current capacity or in his capacity as Deputy Director of Parks and Maintenance. That's disturbing in itself. As the one next in line, again, for the director seat, he has to bear some responsibility in protecting those assets if he's going to hold his employees equally accountable for them same assets. But in his response to these questions, he took no responsibility. And make no mistake about it, this is really not about, for Mr. Hagner, this is not about security cameras not working. This is not about thefts. Of course, those were the catalysts to get us here. But ultimately, this is about accountability and responsibility. And Mr. Hagner, in every opportunity, he shied away from responsibility. And he has a responsibility to protect, and I keep saying it, the assets of the community, of the citizens of the city of Augusta. That's one of his biggest charges. He developed a budget for the maintenance division. He make purchases, large purchases of equipment for his folks to be able to carry out their responsibility and tasks. And once he makes those purchases, he's saying, I'm no longer responsible for them. And that's a problem. So I've lost total confidence in his ability to lead, to manage, to supervise, and to be ultimately responsible for the assets of this community within the Parks and Recreation Department.
Before we move on to the next document, I just wanted to point out on the first page at the bottom, there's two highlighted portions. I think the question was asked of Mr. Hagner about inventory. Do you see that section?
Absolutely.
And can you read what that document states or what Mr. Hagner answered when he asked if he knew or when's the last time there was 100% inventory of equipment?
Right. So basically, risk management was asking Mr. Hagner during that interview, because again, all our equipment, all our tools, whatever we have is supposed to be inventoried and accounted for. Everything is supposed to have an asset number and supposed to be able to be accounted for. So whenever risk management asks for an audit of those equipment, anything that we purchase that should have an asset number, it should come back 100%. But according to the latest, again, according to Mr. Hagner, the latest inventory of equipment check, he said, in 2019 was the last time we had done one. He said approximately, we don't really know for certain, but he said approximately 90% of the equipment was accounted for. So my question is, where's the other 10%? And in his role, why can't he explain to me or anyone what happened to the other 10%? Is it out of service? Have we lost it? Has it been destroyed? Where's the other 10%? And he has no answer for that, nor no accountability for that. That's a problem.
And just, I would like to ask, and would it be Mr. Hagner's responsibility to make sure that the equipment or inventory is 100% accountable for?
Oh, absolutely. He's the Deputy Director of Parks and Maintenance. He's responsible for that entire division in totality.
I'm gonna move on to my last two documents, Mr. McDowell. Do you see the new document that is on the screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you familiar with this document,
Yes,
Mr.
ma'am,
McDowell?
I am.
And did you consider this document when making your decision to terminate Mr. Hagner?
Absolutely. Even though this document was an interview conducted again by risk management in relation to Mr. Sam Smith. However, that's highlighted there for me that stood out is the camera system. And it states the camera system has not been functioning since at least January. Again, the terminology is so ambiguous. It said at least January, so that's the last time they can kind of, I guess, account for when the camera system wasn't working. And Mr. Smith states that he brought this to Mr. Hagner's attention. He brought this to Mr. Hagner's attention. So at a minimum, since January of 2020 to our most recent step in July, there's been zero efforts to ensure that camera system is operable and functioning at the level it should function and at the level that our expectation is for it to function. But again, Mr. Hagner took no responsibility for that either.
And I'm going to show you my last document because you spoke about the camera system. So just to kind of lead into our last document. And can you see this new document?
Yes, ma'am.
Have you ever seen this document, or are you familiar with this document, Mr. McDowell?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you consider this document, or did it play any part in your decision to ultimately terminate Mr. Hagner?
Yes, ma'am, it did. Doing risk management reporting and interviewing, I had asked for risk management to give me a full accountability of thefts, of inventory concerns within the Parks and Recreation Department. This document here dates back to June of 2014. it highlighted some of the same issues and concerns as it related to the camera system. Now, I will point out to you, Mr. Hagner tenure didn't start until August of 2014, but again, there's a 2-month gap. But having said that, as the Deputy Director of Parks and Recreation, A, Mr. Hagner should be familiar with this document, or should have been familiar with this document, and B, the same issues as it relates to the camera system not operating in 2014, we're now in 2020 and we're making the same argument. The camera systems aren't operating to the capacity they should. So yes, this was part of my, in reviewing all of this in totality, which led me to the decision, unfortunately, I had to make. But again, to me, this is about accountability and responsibility.
Okay. And just for the record, this is a 4-page document. And also for the record, because I would like to tender into evidence employers' exhibits A, B, C, D, E, F, G into evidence. Okay, I have one last question for you, Mr. McDowell. Considering everything that you have discussed, is there anything else you considered when making your decision to terminate Mr. Hagner?
Let me just say this. As someone that sits in the director's seat, there are several things that really makes you uncomfortable. And when you have to make decisions as a director, knowing that your decision will potentially adversely impact someone's livelihood, for me, you don't take that lightly. You take all those things into consideration. That is one of the reasons why I asked for a thorough investigation for risk management, because again, if I'm in a position where I have to make decisions that impacts one's livelihood adversely, I want to make sure I have the facts on my side and that I'm making a good decision. Equally, I have a fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers. I've been tasked with being, and I'm very fortunate to be the Director of Parks and Recreation. And I'm responsible not only for the maintenance division, the program division, the special events division, and ultimately, as a director, I bear responsibility and accountability, ultimately. And when I lose the confidence in those that work with me in carrying out my mission, then I have to make tough decisions. I didn't want to be here. I didn't want to have to make that decision. I didn't want to adversely or potentially adversely impact Mr. Hagner's livelihood. But again, for me, I have a fiduciary responsibility, and that's to the seat of Augusta and to the taxpayers. And where there's a problem, it's incumbent upon me to address those problems. And this is systemic. This goes back to 2014 up into 2020, and there's been little to no change. We're having the same conversations about the same inoperable camera system in 2020, and we've had a theft in 2020 and in 2019 and zero change. There has to be some accountability. There has to be some responsibility. And unfortunately, we find ourselves here. I wish Mr. Hagner well. It's unfortunate we had to be here, but that decision had to be made. And again, I didn't take that lightly, but that's a decision that had to be made.
Thank you, Mr. McDowell. I have no further questions for this witness.
Mr. Hagner, do you have any questions for Mr. McDowell?
I'd like to know about the document that was shared from you all from Joe Crozier dated June 2014. Was that ever shared with me by any director, including yourself?
For me, I can speak that I didn't share this document with you, Gary, as you alluded to when we was trying to have your interview. You was demanding documents, And I spoke to you about a series of documents that I had received from risk management, and that you had every right to do an open record request or what have you to obtain those same documents that I had. I cannot speak for anything that happened prior to me or any other director. It should have been shared with you, but again, those are other directors that make those decisions. And I mean, I can't speak for them, nor will I ever try to.
All right. Thank you, Mr. McDowell. Will you stay in the witness room, because some of the members may have some questions for you specifically, because you're the one directly attached to
Okay.
this termination, if you don't mind.
Okay.
All right. Counselor, do you have anything further?
No, that is the end of the employer's case.
Okay. All right. Mr. Hagner, go ahead, and we'll allow you.
All right. I'm going to be sharing some documents a little less tech savvy than Ms. Smith did. I'll be holding my camera up to my screen to show you the document when the time is right. Unfortunately, I don't have the ability to get them on the screen, or should say, moved over to the Zoom screen. I'd like to start with the fact that I do agree that I've been there for 6 years. I've had excellent reviews for the 5 years that I've had reviews done, starting in 2014 through 2019. Those scores were averaged to be about a 2.8 out of 3.0. Each one of them was exemplary. I'm going to just bring up I'm just going to bring up one of them right now. It's the 2015, I'm sorry, yeah, let's see here. You can see my screen. I know that's probably not really the greatest, but that is what, and I'm going to take this and continue to just scroll. Positive strengths positively affect the safety and aesthetics of our parks. Ability to monitor PPPM fairly and consistently. These are things that were listed as my strengths. And lead the department with GPS monitoring, again, working with vehicles and equipment. And again, there's other things as well that are not necessarily pertinent to this. But again, this is consistent with all of the reviews that I had. This is the 2016. The last one was 2015, shows a 2.8 out of 3.0. These are all the way through consistent. There's 2017, 2.9, 2.9. Same thing here in 2019, which is my last one, 2.8, 2.8. Again, there's nothing that's been in any of my reviews that has been, in any way negative whatsoever. And that's with 3 different directors prior to Mr. McDowell. So I'd like to start off with the termination letter that was brought up earlier about those 2 typos. I'd like to have you look at the document, the same document. At the very bottom, it says of page 1, and I'll go back here and I'll put it up here on this. It says, we have determined that the cameras and then we'll go to the top of the second page, of the maintenance yard have been inoperable since 2014. And that was brought out in light of that document from Joe Crozier. Well, I'm going to refute that when we have documents that have, again, we're going to go back to my screen from, let me see here. This would be from the narrative from the sheriff's office from July 1st, 2019. This is Deputy Jessica Anthony. In the 3rd paragraph, I reviewed the CCTV footage from the incident and observed a black male wearing what appeared to be a white shirt, black pants, and a white hat. The unknown subject was approximately 5'10" to 6'2" in height. Closed circuit TV shows the male emerging from the back fence line, shows him enter and look at both of the sheds on the property. The male walks towards where the vehicles are parked, but unfortunately, at this point, there's no footage of the vehicle, of the subject taking the items from the vehicles. The items that were stolen were weed eaters, backpack blowers, and a couple gas cans. And essentially, that was at the first theft, which totaled to be about $4,700. And from there, during my meeting with, oops, can you see me okay right now?
Yes, we see.
Okay, just double checking. During our meeting with Mr. Sims and Mr. McDowell and Ms. Rookert, and Ms. Smith as well, I asked a question because on there, as I said, it says that the cameras have been inoperable. We determined, who is we? I asked who determined that the cameras were not working since 2014. I asked the question of them. They could not or would not answer the question. Ms. Rookert was there to witness this. Again, it was telling because, now they bring up a document that I've never seen in my life. 3 directors have never shared that with me to see that document prior than to today. It says here that, again, we talked about there were typos in there. Mr. Sims asked if there were, can we agree that there is error in the termination paperwork? I responded, no, we could not, because realistically, termination paperwork, I think Mr. McDowell pretty much expects perfection. I do too, from a standpoint of, here is something that is taking a total turn of my life by having termination paperwork, and yet they couldn't even get the paperwork right without typos. I do want to refute one item that Mr. McDowell mentioned about the fact that there was that I was behaving in a belligerent manner at the exit interview. We had a witness that was in there. There was no belligerent behavior. I don't know what belligerent behavior he was talking about, but I left that meeting. I took the paperwork and, as mentioned, went up to my office with the marshal and took some personal effects away in about 5 minutes that I had, and took what I could at that time. So moving on, during the theft, again, prior to that theft, July 1 of 2019, I had worked with Georgia Power to upgrade all the LED lighting. That was done in 2018. The area was well lit. I think it showed that from the document here, showing that you could see clearly that there was a black male in, and it described what he was wearing and everything. So I'm not sure, again, where those, where the cameras are not working comes from. During that theft, thieves cut the fence and entered the yard. They didn't break into anything else other than the trucks once they came in to get the small equipment out. As the document said, they looked around, didn't take anything from any of the other buildings. But after that, we realized that we needed to upgrade cameras, and that was certainly something that I had been working with the director at the time, which was the interim director, Ron Hauk, who of course just recently passed. So Ron and I came to a decision that we did need to upgrade cameras, and as noted, we did put in for cameras in the 2020 budget, which would have been drafted right around the time of July of 2019. Cameras were not requested prior to that. I will agree with that we did not bring forth any request for additional cameras prior to the 2020 budget year. So during that time, we got that into the budget, and as noted, it was made available in March. Our staff were on furlough for approximately 6 weeks from the middle of March through the beginning of May. At that time, and when we returned, the decision had been made that that another staff member would be responsible for taking care of doing all of the camera work, and that his name is Robert Martin, Bobby Martin. He was serving and is serving in a dual role as the athletics manager, but also a projects manager. And he was to coordinate all of that. I had asked on regular occasions with Mr. Martin to see where we were on that project. He had not yet been able to get that started. And again, I'm not deflecting, but we all have different roles, and his role, part of his role, was to take care of project management, which included the cameras for our shop as well as various recreation centers. So again, the cameras were operational since 2014. They continued to be operational. So as we then approach July of 2020, then we have the second theft. That theft occurred on July 21st, and we were reported, of course, on the morning of the 22nd. We took and had, as noted in there, they said initially that the cameras did not appear to be working. What happened, and I found out that morning afterwards, was that Mr. Smith, who the cameras are in his office, or again, before he was let go, that's where the monitor is for those cameras. Again, it is a closed circuit TV setup. And I asked him, I said, what is not working? And he said, well, the monitor. So I swapped monitors. And then we determined that the cameras then were indeed working as expected. One was slightly askew, but 3 of the 4 were working as expected. The footage then was reviewed by myself, by Mr. Smith, and by Mr. BJ Rucker, who's one of our senior supervisors. Really, unfortunately, the footage did not show anything of value, and therefore we didn't pursue any further. I let in a phone call the officer know that we were able to get the footage reviewed, but unfortunately it really did not give us anything more to work from. There is another camera that is mounted adjacent to our lot. It basically spans our lot, for Recreation and Parks, Central Services, and the Augusta Utilities Division. That camera is mounted on a pole, and I checked with Alan Saxon with Augusta Utilities, who's I'll say the owner and operator of that camera, what they could give us in the way of footage. And it was unfortunate. They said that their camera was down. It was being transferred to a different monitoring company. And that camera was not present at the 2019. So that was an addition that was added between the first theft and the second. So again, as mentioned earlier, constant improvement. We did lighting upgrades. Then the camera, which then was pointed at our lot as well as their lot, would have given us a little bit better view than just the cameras that we had. Ongoing conversations with Mr. Saxon, as well as with the marshal's office, and specifically with Sean Hargis Rhodes, led me to believe that we could definitely find better cameras than what we had. And again, we were, of course, in the process of getting those done. We did talk about additional work for the 2021 budget at that time, and that included even more lighting. And if we needed to add even more money for cameras, we would do so. I also looked to add cameras at another site, which was Diamond Lakes. We have a maintenance shop at that location. I had submitted a request for $100,000 for cameras for 2021. That was reduced to $20,000 in their response for the 2021 budget. And that, show you, there is the 2021 budget request, and it's a first line item, security cameras. And it was reduced, like I say, from $100,000 that I had submitted to what they ultimately decided to submit to the budget team. All right. So as part of those, in addition to the cameras and lighting, I have been requesting park rangers. Park rangers are essentially security guards. These folks are would have been based out of this shop. This was something that we began in the 2018 year for the 2019, I'm sorry, the 2017 year for the 2018 budget. So we started for 2018, 2019, 2020, and then again in 2021. Those, and I'm going to bring up that I have, let's see, I have the 2019 one here showing. This is the request that was made, and I have the 2020 and the 2021 as well. Essentially, what we've done is request for 2 full-time and 2 part-time park rangers. Again, all of these folks would have been based out of this shop yard. This would have given us security presence in the evening hours. These folks would have been working from a 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. shift or something along that lines year round. And again, that would have given us a much better level of security, not just for this lot, but for all of our parks, cemeteries, and facilities. These measures were directly denied by the same people who are terminating me for the lack of security measures. I've tried on my best behalf to find various ways to improve our security. The park rangers / security guards were certainly one of the best options because it would have utilized folks or vehicles at a time that our other folks were not there, and they would have been able to be in that yard as well as, like I say, other locations. So the same people that are trying to terminate me are the ones that denied me this request to make improvements for security. And again, I can't arbitrarily make hiring or hire people if funds aren't appropriated. So in addition to the $100,000, the $20,000, again, we have made other improvements as well as with the equipment itself. I looked. Oh, all right, I'm going to have to plug in my phone because I'm already showing a low battery. Okay. All right. So, can you see me still?
Yes, you're good.
All right. Very good. Sorry about that. It talks about transfers of responsibility to rank and file. We talked about that, or I should say, Mr. McDowell talked about transferring responsibility. The day after that we had the theft, I put into effect a written policy that was probably overdue, and I'm not going to, again, shirk responsibility on that. But we had in place already a very good procedure that was well known within the division. We have two very capable senior supervisors. One that basically starts by coming in at about 5:30 a.m. He's the one that opens the gates and was the one that discovered the theft in July. The other one leaves at 5 p.m. and therefore locks gates, checks everything out at the end of the day, is there to just kind of take care of all the loose ends at the end of the day to make sure that things are locked up and so forth. Again, I cannot stress this enough that these folks are highly reputable and did a great job on a daily basis of making sure that things were locked. So during the commission of both thefts, all vehicles were locked, all of the gates were locked, all the lights were working, the cameras were working, and yet we're trying to basically thwart thieves that cut locks to come into the facility or cut a fence to come into the facility to take items. I'm not happy that the fact that those things happened. I certainly, again, tried to make sure that we were looking to make it as theft-proof as possible, given the level of funding and that we had received. So the draft policy that I had sent to Mr. McDowell on or about July 24th, addressing all of these, I never received any kind of response back from him whatsoever. So he didn't say that he liked it. He didn't have concerns over it. Again, there was no communication, even after, with several email responses on my part to generate that. So I'm going to go back to the email from, or I should say the document from Andy Oates. It was brought up earlier during Mr. McDowell's discussions. The question was brought up about the 90% accountability. We did an full inventory. Well, I'm going to back up even more. The question was I familiar with the PPPM, the loss prevention policy? I totally disagree with the statement that was made that no, I do not have responsibility or knowledge of that policy. We, on a regular basis, communicate with, and I say we meaning me, communicate with Fleet, working with them to complete inventories. The last full inventory was done in November of 2019. The plan would be to do that annually. So again, it would have been, the plan would have been to have another full inventory completed on or about November of 2020. The question that was asked, when was last time the 100% inventory had been completed? And I said 2019, and I said approximately 9% of the equipment was accounted for. That was an off the cuff number. I mean, it was not something that was based on, something that I had right in front of me. It was an approximation at best. It could be 98%. But there were a couple items that were questionable, including one mower that was lost between Fleet and the First Vehicle Services shop. We were in process, I was working with Mr. Ron Crowden, who is the shop, or I should say the fleet manager. He was working with the shop manager to find that vehicle or piece of equipment. In addition, other things like string trimmers and blowers, they had to implement a policy there at the First Vehicle Services to make sure that vehicle or equipment was signed out by the same person that brought it in. Previously, equipment was walking away, and that was determined during the inventory that some of our equipment that was brought to the shop was not present. It had not been returned to us, and therefore it was not accountable by the fleet shop. It was not accountable by the repair shop. So that was something that they had to implement, that policy, again, continual improvement, to make sure that any equipment would have been signed out upon its repair. So again, the staff that that works, let me go back here just for one moment. So one of the things I wanted to also mention was that obviously if, there's, we ran a 24, I shouldn't say 24-hour, but a 7-day operation. So on weekends, we had put in place, obviously, those folks that were working to make sure that the lot was locked as soon as they left the lot, that there were no, gates left open, no trucks left open, no keys left in vehicles. Again, everybody did a great job of following up on the policies and procedures that we had in place. The thefts came solely from, again, a trailer that in July, having a trailer pulled away by a vehicle. They opened the gate, they cut the lock, opened the gate, and pulled the trailer out. It was not to the fact that I or any of the staff were negligent on taking care of the vehicles and equipment. They're stored the same way in our lot as every other lot in the city. They're locked in a locked compound. Once we had the theft, I immediately started working with Mr. Crowden and his assistant there in the fleet shop to look at things like wheel locks, like boots, as well as other trailer locks that could potentially assist in keeping an honest thief out. But no lock is fully foolproof. There is certainly always an option or opportunity for a good thief to get in and steal things. So again, I'm not happy that these things happened on my watch, but I can say that we have used good diligence in trying to take care of the equipment that was in our care, that I had worked with Mr. Oates on a regular basis. He and on regular annual basis met with our staff to do training and talked also about the need for making sure that all equipment is locked up, that we did that on an annual basis during our annual trainings that we had with Andy Oates and others from risk management. And let me think here if there's one more item I wanted to bring. I think I've got, basically those are the things I wanted to bring up. I think at this point, that would end my case.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask Mr. Hagner just a few questions?
Yes. Yeah, I was gonna ask you, Ms. Smith, if you wanted to cross Mr. Hagner real fast.
Okay, yeah, just very quickly, I'm going to share this document. I think, Mr. Hagner, you brought it up in your testimony, and obviously the employer presented it in its case in chief.
Hey, I'm sorry, I couldn't really hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sharing the document. Do you see it, Mr. Hagner?
Okay, let me pull it up.
Let me see if I can zoom in.
Yes, I have.
Okay.
Yes, I have that.
Okay, I think you testified that it was just not true that you were not familiar with the PPPM policy regarding loss prevention. I want you to look at this. Okay, I want you to look at this document that was created by Mr. Oates, who you are familiar with, that you said you worked with. And if you go down to the highlighted portion, well, if you go to the first highlighted portion, just to make it clear, it says several questions were asked by Andy Oates, Q, and replies given by Gary Hagner, A, that's you. So if you go to the second highlighted portion, it says, Mr. Oates asked you, are you familiar with the loss prevention policy of the PPPM? And what was your answer, Mr. Hagner?
That is not the answer I provided.
So you're saying that Mr. Oates provided false information in this risk management report?
No, what I'm saying is that it was misinterpreted as to what I said. I did not say that because I am familiar with it. We do, as I've mentioned, the inventories on a regular basis, and we do take care of making sure that equipment is logged in and out on a regular basis. So to say that I am totally unfamiliar with it, no. I may have misunderstood his question, but I certainly was not unfamiliar with the loss prevention policy of the PPPM.
Well, just let the record reflect that the question that was asked of you that is on the risk management report that was created by Mr. Andy Oates, which you just testified you knew Andy, you worked with him, y'all appear to have a good work relationship. He asked you, quote, are you familiar with the loss prevention policy of the PPPM? And the answer that is indicated on the report that you gave him was no, not until you provided it to me today. I want you to go down to the bottom of the same report, the second to last highlighted portion. Mr. Oates asked you, when is the last time a 100% inventory of equipment has been completed for the landscaping section? In the report, Mr. Oates indicated you said 2019, approximately 90% of the equipment was accounted for. Did you not say that?
As I mentioned in my testimony, that the inventory was completed in November of 2019, and that was just an approximate number. It was not based on any documentation that I had in front of me that day. It was just an anecdotal that we got almost all of the equipment, but there were a few pieces that were not accounted for. And as I explained in my testimony, some of them were picked up by at the fleet shop by possibly other departments. I'm sorry, at the repair shop, First Vehicle Services. And again, those conversations were held between Casey Braswell and myself. Casey works at the fleet shop and was the one responsible for the inventory. And we worked diligently to make sure that we accounted for the equipment that we had listed in our department.
And to be clear that I understand your testimony today, you're saying it was Casey's responsibility, who was your subordinate, correct?
No.
To make
Casey
sure that 100%
Casey
of the inventory was accounted for.
Casey works at the fleet shop and handles inventories for all of the departments. I worked with her just like other department staff would have worked with her to manage the inventory for their department. So she's the central inventory control person for all of the fleet inventory.
Well, let's clear something up, Mr. Hagner. You keep saying her department. My understanding is, it's recreation and parks, and there's two divisions. That's why it's called recreation and parks. Is that correct?
Yes.
So it's fleet was fleet under your division of recreation and parks, which was the parks division?
No, it's a totally separate department under central services. The fleet management office manages when new equipment comes on board, they issue it to us. When equipment is to be disposed of, they handle that responsibility as well. And everything in between, we work directly with them. If there's a problem with a piece of equipment, if there's a piece missing, those are the times that I would be working with Ms. Braswell and the folks at Fleet to verify inventories. And again, that inventory was completed in November of 2019, just a few months prior to the last theft.
So just to be clear, now you're saying that it was another department, central services responsibility to ensure there was 100% inventory in your division.
That is not what I said at all. What I said was they manage the inventories for all of the departments, ours as well as others, engineering, utilities, you name it. All the departments have an inventory. Each department is responsible for taking care of their own inventory. And then we submit it to the fleet department so they have a full accountability of all equipment across the board.
Okay. Well, I think I don't know if you answered my question, but what the document states is Mr. Oates asked you, when is the last time a 100% inventory of equipment has been completed for the landscaping section? I assume that related to parks. And you stated 2019, approximately 90% of the equipment was accounted for. But we can move on.
As I mentioned, that was an anecdotal number. I did not have an inventory in front of me that day to say that we were missing one piece or 5 pieces or any number. It was just a round number off the cuff, and that's what was given.
Okay. I think you also testified that you had procedures in place, that you had good procedures. Moving down to the last page of that report, Mr. Oates asked you, is there a plan to train/retrain employees on the importance of property accountability and potential for personal financial obligations to replace equipment if neglect is a factor? And you stated no, but we are open to giving this type of training, meaning that you had never trained your employees on the importance of property accountability and the potential for personal financial obligation to replace equipment, even though you knew thefts had occurred within the Parks Division.
So I'm going to use that statement. You just eliminated the last words of that. If neglect is a factor, that was what we talked about. And we had not looked at if neglect had been a factor in training. We do regularly have staff training for a variety of things, including making sure that vehicles are locked, equipment is taken care of, that it's not just, left open. Many, many times that has been completed by risk management staff and or internal staff during trainings. However, regarding the neglect portion of it, no, that's what that was about. We said we were open to including that, and it had not been presented before to our staff. And we both agreed that was a good thing to do.
One last question, Mr. Hagner. I think you testified that you said you had good procedures or great procedures in place. Do you think that great procedures that were in place would have led to 2 thefts occurring at the same location within a 13-month period, totaling a loss of $33,000, which no one has been able to account for?
So we're going to go back to a statement I made earlier that both
Can you answer if yes or no? Like, do you think if good procedures were in place, that those circumstances would have occurred?
That question doesn't deserve a yes or no answer. It deserves an explanation. So I'm going to give an explanation. Both thefts occurred despite having all of the procedures in place. One was a penetration through a fence, a locked fence and gates. They cut a fence and entered into the fenced yard and took equipment, broke locks on the trucks. The trucks themselves were damaged. The locks, the boxes all had to be replaced because they broke the locks in order to get into the trucks to get the equipment out of the locked trucks. So having the procedures in place, yes, that all of those things were followed, and yet thieves broke into trucks and equipment and stole it. The second situation, again, all of the yard was locked, all of the trucks were properly locked up, all of the gates were locked. We had the keys were in the buildings as designed. They didn't do anything more than having to come into a gate and took a trailer. That's the unfortunate part. Despite all of our efforts, it wouldn't matter if it was in our lot or central services or engineering or anywhere else. If they cut a lock and came in and took a piece of equipment in the middle of the night, they took a piece of equipment in the middle of the night, despite all of the efforts that we made and took to make that lot secure.
And I said my last question was going to be my last, but I just have to follow up to your explanation. Do you think it's possible, though, that the thieves kept coming back to that location because they knew the security cameras were not working properly and that no one would be able to catch them, which is the case?
That's something that's conjecture. There's no way to know that. There is no way to know that.
And that's fine, Mr. Hagner. No, I don't have any further questions.
All right. With that, I've got a couple of questions. The chair has a couple of questions for Mr. McDowell, real quick. Mr. McDowell, do you happen to know what the value of the inventory that y'all have currently is?
The total value of our inventory?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
No, sir. Not off the top of my head. I'm sure I can get it.
Okay. All right. The reason why I ask is because you came up, we know $33,000 is missing. I'm trying to, and it's over a 13-month period.
Uh-huh.
And so did anybody ever, so what exactly was the full amount of the inventory? If the inventory was done, does anybody have an idea of what your inventory currently is and what you have?
Well, if you including vehicles, dump trucks, weed
No,
eaters.
I'm talking about basically the inventory that Mr. Hagner was responsible for.
And that would include fleet, which means I got trucks, I got tractors, I
Okay,
got the whole gamut.
you got the whole thing.
Everything. Trailers, like he alluded to, big mowers that cost us $110,000. I got some
Right.
Greatleys that may cost me only $5,000 or $8,000.
And you got string trimmers that cost you $150.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly. I
Right.
got
So
you.
it goes from the smallest to the greatest.
Uh-huh. Okay. So do you have a better idea today than you did, before the pandemic and all this other stuff of what you have and what you don't have?
I would say probably about the same. We are in the process now of doing a full audit of everything, because my understanding, and again, a lot of these things I learned since the termination of Mr. Hagner, some equipment that we purchased. When I say we, I mean the Parks and Recreation Department. However, it's in another department because he loaned it to them. Again, a lot of things are coming out, as you can only imagine. Once one action happens, it triggers a whole lot of actions. And so a lot of these things we're still in process of getting our arms around. But I will say this, Mr. Hagner was responsible for a $2.2 million budget. So just imagine 50% of that was salaries.
Right.
And then the rest would be inventory plus, some contracts here and there. So you're talking upwards of $500,000 to $1 million easily.
Yeah.
And again, some of this is purchased through our SPLOST program too, so it wouldn't necessarily be your operational budget.
Correct. But the only thing he bought was he made the request to buy stuff. He made the request to buy stuff. You or whoever was the director prior to you or whatever, they actually made the request and went out and made the purchase. He didn't go purchase something on his own.
Some of the things he did. Some of the things Mr. Hagner had, again, he was deputy director. So he would have had the volition to go out and make these purchases. Again, all these things are requested in the budget.
Correct.
As we develop the budget, so then the purchasing part becomes the formality, because it would have already been approved by the commission.
Okay. And so it's safe to say that the truck, and I read about this in the paper,
Right.
the trailer that was basically driven off the lot.
Absolutely.
That was a significant portion of the $33,000 that was.
Well, my understanding, the trailer plus equipment,
Right.
and also my understanding, it was not only just the equipment on that trailer, but
Right.
the thieves took the time to load up another more that wasn't even on the trailer. They knew exactly where to go get it, and they loaded it on the trailer. My
Okay.
understanding, that one July 21st theft totaled over $30,000, 33, 38.
All right.
If you couple that with the one that happened just in June of 2019, that number goes up, because I think that was around 4,700 with the streamers and the weed eaters. So,
Okay.
I mean, we already close to, I know, over 40,000 just with
Right.
those two thefts.
I guess my question is the stuff that went missing with an operation y'all have, the stuff that went missing in June of 2019 and June of last year, that's never acceptable. But
right.
Those things, those are harder to find, because you're trying to inventory shovels and rakes to tractors and dump trucks.
Right.
This was much easier. This was much easier to see, and it was clearly they went in and just they knew it was there. They physically broke in, like they broke into my home or anything else, and just stole it.
Right. And even in 19, keep in mind, those were weed eaters. So they had
Correct.
asset numbers attached to them. As Mr. Hagner alluded to, when that purchase come in, because it's inventory, it instantly gets an asset number.
Right.
And once we know that asset number is missing, of course, we can trace back to the cost of it, how we arrived at the $4,700.
Right. Okay. All right.
And if I could follow up, please, on that, I'd
Sure.
appreciate it.
Real quick.
All right, so the first theft I have in front of me, and I'll bring that up, that is $4,707 and change for the various weed eaters, blowers, and so forth that was stolen that first time. The second theft of the trailer was about $6,000. The mower was, one mower was about $7,000. And then the Walker mower, the expensive one, is about $12,000 to $13,000. So about $27,000 total. When you put them all together, it was approximately almost $32,000 for both thefts. I do want to mention, and I mentioned this earlier and had not had a chance yet to do it. I just wanted to I didn't bring a witness or witnesses with me. I had one of my friends, I should say, that it was a partner that I worked closely with over the years and became good friends with them. Her name is Diane Sprague. She lives in Augusta. She is on the Tree Commission, and I'm going to just read a brief letter from her. My name is Diane Sprague, and I live in Augusta, have lived in Augusta for 20 years. I'm a member of the Augusta Tree Commission and Trees for Augusta. In both organizations, I've had the pleasure of working with Gary Hagner. Gary and I have planned and executed many Arbor Day celebrations for the city, worked on successful Tree City applications for the Arbor Day Foundation. It has been nice to work with someone from the city who is proactive and responsive. Thank you for your time and consideration. I have one other letter. This is from Brad Holdren. He's the head coach of the rowing club, Augusta Rowing Club. I met Gary in the fall of 2015 and worked closely with him for the past 5 years. It's been, in my opinion, that he is and was one of the bright spots with the city of Augusta. As the assistant director of Parks and Rec, I always assumed he'd be like any assistant coach on any team. When the head coach is unavailable or unapproachable, the assistant coach handles all the little things. And never having met the director in 5 years here, I thought Gary did a great job of handling all of these little things. He helped us each year planning the head of the South Regatta, events on Lake Olmsted, and when asked, would attend board meetings to explain why our plans would or would not work. He was easily approachable, would see him at events. We volunteered together all over town, including cycling, running, dragon boat races, etc. Gary could not and would not always solve all our problems when we had them, but he could and would answer the phone and point us in the right direction. Sometimes, in fact, when we wanted funding, he had to tell us no. Even that was okay because at least he would give us an answer. As the new guy in town and clueless on local politics and ways of doing things, I learned the ropes. Gary was always very pleasant and eager to help point me in the right direction or get me with the correct person to get things accomplished. We got to the point where we could work together on various cleanup projects and other projects. And if ever anything was needed, all he had to do was call and ask. And again, this was a gentleman named Brad Holdren. I have others. The point is, I've worked closely in the community. I've worked my butt off to try to make Augusta a better place. These things happened on my watch. I'm not happy about them. But what I can say is that continued improvement continues to get us to a better place. You can't stop every theft. Unfortunately, as you alluded to, if someone broke into your house, is that your fault? If you lock the doors and you've done everything you could possibly do, we've made the efforts to try to go beyond where we are. Unfortunately, they were not all put in place yet. So I'm going to leave it at that and leave it at your mercy. I take great pride in the job that I did and would like to continue to do for the city of Augusta.
Thanks.
And Mr. Chairman, let me just respond to all that. First of all, again, no one trying to paint the picture that Gary's not a good guy. No one's trying to paint the picture that Gary didn't do some great work for the city of Augusta, because he did. I think the work speaks for itself. But I think those things are besides the point. And if you listen to Mr. Hagner carefully, he says, on the one hand, the cameras were operable which means what the sheriff department stated in their report wasn't true. He also stated that his comments to Mr. Andy Oates, he's refuting that, and Mr. Andy Oates was quoting him according to the report based on his response.
Correct.
And then finally, Mr. Hagner says the cameras were working, but he was working with the budget to get the cameras working, or at least working up to par. So you don't get to have it both ways. Either the cameras are working and they're sufficient, so you shouldn't be looking for monies to upgrade them or replace them if they're operating efficiently. And if you had a theft in 2019 and you haven't corrected it in 2020, and you have a $2.2 million budget, and the fix could have been $4,000, $5,000, you can make it work. And my last point to that is, he talked about hiring park rangers. That's 2 individuals, and we have well over 40 to 45 sites. There's no way a 2-man operation for 8 hours a day can cover the entire area and catch thieves at all our facilities. And the commissioners approved $500,000 in 2019 in November for security cameras for the Parks and Recreation Department. I'll leave it at that.
Anyone have any other questions?
Can I refute one thing that Mr. McDowell just said?
Hang on one second, Mr. Hagner. I need to get my board members in, and because I think Mr. Riles has a question.
I like to ask Mr. McDowell, in his budget, do he have the option to go out and put the cameras if the cameras ain't working?
Absolutely. That's the beauty of the budget. As long as he maintains his bottom line, if he needs to do a BTR, budget transfer request, or if he needs to make a purchase because of an emergency, as long as he doesn't go over his bottom line, he can do that. He can ask for that to be done, but nowhere has he ever asked for that to be done. And that's the unfortunate part of it, because to me, the thefts and his fiduciary responsibility are serious enough that if I'm having an issue and I can't get it addressed during budgetary season, but I know that these are ongoing issues, I would have asked for within my budget to transfer some dollars to address those issues. Absolutely.
Can I ask one more question?
Yes, sir.
The equipment that be on the truck, why they are not locked up in storage instead on the truck?
That's a good question. When you have, and this is what led to my decision, if you can't get the cameras for whatever reason, and no one is cooperating with you in terms of the leadership team and hearing your cry for some assistance, then you have to come up with other means and methods to try to mitigate as best as possible. No one can catch every thief, and that's not our expectation. So he could have suggested maybe a warehousing of the equipment. He could have done a number of other things to try to help mitigate that theft, but none of those things were brought up. Now, I know Mr. Hagner mentioned that on July the 24th, he came up with a plan, and he did. You know why? Because after the most recent theft, I asked him to do so. That's why he came up with a plan in July the 24th of 2020. He didn't say he came up with one after the theft in 2019. He came up with it because I said, Mr. Hagner, you need to come up with a plan to mitigate these problems and issues that are ongoing in your division. And he did. He came up with some ideas, but I'm saying, why haven't you done this prior to me asking you?
And the last question, how do you know that the people who drive the truck brought the equipment back in? How do you hold them accountable?
Well, I think that leads back into earlier conversation about the loss prevention policy and Mr. Hagner articulating to them what his expectations are and what the city expectations are based on that policy. Now, according to Mr. Andy Oates' report, given again what Mr. Hagner's response was, if Mr. Hagner is not familiar with the policy and he's not sharing what his thoughts are with the policy to his staff and coming up with an SOP to address some of these issues, then there really isn't one. The equipment could have came in that afternoon. According to Mr. Hagner, everything was there. And then unfortunately, later on in that evening or night, someone came in and took the equipment. Again, I have to take Mr. Hagner's word that he was ensured that everything that left out that day came back in that evening.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Does anyone have anything else?
And just to Mr. Ryle's question about why were the trucks not locked? The trucks were locked, the equipment locked within the trucks. They're secure boxes. That's what that was deemed to be more than adequate for keeping equipment secure. That's what every other landscape company does with their vehicles. We have the same vehicles that most of the landscape companies run around town and around the nation. There's the same drop tailgate type with secure storage boxes affixed to them that allows the smaller gas powered equipment to be fit into there and securely stowed overnight. And that's to take and gain efficiencies. If you had to literally unload all the equipment every night into a central shop and then load it back up the next day, you'd be looking at time of easily more than an hour to an hour and a half's time to get everybody's equipment unloaded and loaded every day. We try to gain efficiencies by getting equipment or getting people out of the shop as timely in a manner as possible. That's why equipment is left on the truck in lock boxes on a daily basis.
Anybody got anything else?
I have a question, please.
Okay, go ahead.
Are you storing all of the equipment in one place, one site?
No.
Okay.
No, we have several locations that have equipment.
Have there been any equipment stolen from other sites?
There was actually equipment stolen after I left from where a building was literally broken into.
Objection, evidence not in the record, and we have no way to obviously refute that.
Okay, and then one other question is,
as well as multiple other locations in other departments with their vehicles and equipment in their lots that have been stolen over the years throughout the course of where reports are done with $1 listing it on the accident or incident report, whereas I took and made sure that
I can't. Yeah, we can't really.
Okay.
That's not relevant, Gary. I understand what you're saying, but that's not germane to this.
That's fine.
Then my next question is, if I may.
Yes.
Was there a request for repairing the cameras placed in? Did you ever do a request, or anyone ever do a request to have the cameras repaired?
There's no need to repair cameras that were operational. And as I noted and showed you earlier, the 2019 report made by the deputy stated that she was able to see a black male of approximately 5'10" to 6'2", wearing specific clothing. I'd say that the cameras are working pretty well when you can identify that degree of level of details.
Okay, thank you.
When we had the 2020 incident noted, and I explained what happened there. There was the deputy that reviewed the cameras the morning after the theft, said the cameras weren't working properly. I told you that we had identified the problem as a monitor in Mr. Smith's office. We realized that was the problem. We swapped the monitors, and then the cameras were operational. It wasn't the cameras that weren't working. It was the monitor itself that wasn't working. We swapped that, and then they were able to, we reviewed the footage. Unfortunately, there was nothing of value from that footage, from that theft.
Thank you.
Anyone got anything else?
I do.
Okay.
To the director. When did you find out about these thefts?
The morning after, when I got the report from staff that we had a break-in into the facility.
Now, you know, with what's all that equipment you have, people, employees can sneak it out in their cars or whatever. They can get it. Anything can be stolen out there. And I'm asking this. If I was the person in charge, the person that y'all trying to terminate, I think it's a disservice because you can't stop people from stealing. And that's going to go on. To replace him, it's going to still go on and on and on. You can't stop it. It's a human nature. And I haven't seen where you've proved that he did anything wrong.
Well, it's not a matter of preventing or keeping an honest man honest. I mean, you're right. We're going to have theft. The problem is, I at least need to be able to catch someone if they do steal. That's where it comes in at. And so, if I'm responsible for a camera system that can assist me with these thefts that we can't stop because they're going to happen regardless to the end of time, using your language, then there has to be some responsibility for the cameras working so I can catch that person who did it. I cannot just shy away from responsibility and say, well, you know, people are going to steal, it's going to happen. And if the camera system ain't working, they just ain't working. And we keep moving on, because at what point do I continue to buy the same equipment over and over again using the taxpayers' dollars?
What could happen is administrative commissioners could say you're responsible.
Absolutely. And they will.
Okay. I'm just throwing that at you because.
And you making my point, sir, because I am responsible ultimately.
But it looks like somebody's got to take the blame somewhere.
I will say that.
Yeah.
How long have you been working for City of Augusta?
Since 2011. I'm going into my 10th year.
You've been working here 10 years.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Mr. McDowell, can you clarify?
Was everything taken from one particular place, or was it spread out over the different places in the county?
Well, at this particular location where we've had this series of thefts, we're talking about one central location. That's the maintenance main fleet yard. Now, to one of your other board members' question, were there other theft at other facilities over the course of time? You bet. A lot of these things I found out after Mr. Hagner had left because he never reported these to me, but that was a theft a few days before he was terminated at one of our cemetery locations. And he had been working with my safety officer and risk management, I guess, to get a police report and all that done too. So I found that out even afterwards, that there was some other thefts at some other locations that Mr. Hagner never had reported to myself. But the safety officer, she took it upon herself to say, hey, I need to make you aware of this. So yes, it's been a systemic problem. It's been a problem. And again, at some point we got to figure this thing out. We can't continue to have it. But to your, Ms. Smith.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, to one of the questions that the board members asked, if Mr. McDowell can clarify, like, he has been employed with Augusta for a while, but how long have you been the Park and Rec director?
I've only been the Park and Recreation director since September 5 of this year. I started off in July of the 23rd, 2011 in Parks and Recreation. I spent 6 years in Parks and Recreation. And then I moved up to the administrative office. Well, I've been since then, since 2016 roughly. And now I'm going back to Parks and Recreation. So I'm pretty familiar with that department. I can say that.
I have a quick question for Mr. Hagner real fast.
Yes.
And Mr. Hagner, when your argument is with the camera system, that the cameras are actually working. The only issue you had with the July incident with the cameras was the monitor was bad. You changed the monitor, the tape was still there, so you just weren't able to review anything because you had
The
bad
deputy,
monitor.
that's correct. The deputy was not able to review it the morning of the incident or the morning after the incident.
Okay.
When we realized the monitor was not right, we swapped that. Then we reviewed the footage and found that really there was nothing that was going to help them. We let them know.
So the deputy, so it goes to my question. So your argument is the camera system worked in 2019. It really works now. But the issue at hand. So my question is this a pretty serious deal? Did you share that information with the director?
Well,
did the director, did you, I mean, so, you know, if you're responsible, you want somebody else to see this too, to say, hey, you need to see this. My question is if once you retrieved the footage, who did you share the information with?
And we reviewed it internally with our staff, as I mentioned, with Sam Smith, the superintendent, as well as BJ Rucker, the senior supervisor. And again, we made that determination and then realized, okay, there's not enough here to make it of any value. So we just contacted the sheriff's office and just said that unfortunately there's not anything that's going to help you here, and left it at that. And that was a phone call that Mr. Smith made. And
how much approximate time? How much does those? In my office, we can look at like you know, a long period of time. We can look at 30 days worth of time. How much recorded time do you have on that camera system?
I believe it's only about 7 days worth.
Okay, and so what was the time frame to where you swapped out were you within the time frame from when you swapped out the monitors, you see it to see exactly what happened?
Yes, it was within 48 hours of the theft.
Okay.
Well, Mr. Chairman, to your question that Mr. Hagner never asked, and that was, did he share it with the director? The short answer is no. The next point, I want to be clear, because he keeps saying we just had to swap the monitor out. To your point about the camera system and the collection of hours. So once you swap the monitor out, the footage should be there.
Correct.
In his own words, he said the footage was of no value, meaning even if the monitors were working, the footage still wouldn't have been sufficient enough to catch anybody. That's what he said.
It showed grainy people walking through the lot, and that was as good as that particular angle of the camera and location of where they were in relation to the cameras. And again, it goes back to the point of, were the cameras working? Yes, they were. Are there better cameras out there? Yes, there are. And that's why I requested with Ron Howe, the previous director, who I worked most closely with. Understand too that Mr. McDowell was only in his role essentially as director for a very, very brief time while he was the interim director in Mr. Houck's absence. We obviously didn't spend a lot of time together. And I think that there was a lot of opportunities for both him and I to share more information had we been closer together. He was located in a totally different place. Right. Now, his point was that I didn't share that information with him. I may not have. I'm not going to try to say that I did. If I didn't, I'm not that kind of person. I'm going to tell you if it didn't happen, it didn't happen. I don't recall sharing that with him afterwards because we didn't have anything of value, but we did share it with the sheriff's office in a phone call.
Okay. All right. Anybody got anything else? I'm ready to proceed to a close.
I'd like to ask Mr. Hagner a question.
All right.
When they viewed the camera, did it show the vehicle pulling the trailer out the yard? Do the cameras cover the gates?
The cameras are pointed in several different locations toward, we have two entry gates. The entry and exit gate that the equipment was taken is further away from the cameras and therefore did not provide as good of view as it did during the first theft, where it, the folks were right nearby to the cameras and they had a much better angle. So unfortunately, no, the footage was of, like I say, grainy, and it was in the middle of the night. So it really was not of footage of value. And that's where, unfortunately, because of the distance, it just didn't provide anything that was usable for the sheriff's office.
Security, y'all wouldn't have cameras at the gate. For one thing, showing people coming in and out. Wouldn't y'all have to have cameras at both gates?
They're not at the gates. They're nearer to the building and affixed at the building. And that's why we were looking to upgrade the camera system and looking and getting, and again, there was $100,000 allocated toward cameras, of which some of it was going to be for our shop and others for the recreation centers. And that would have been the camera or the monitoring company, whoever we ultimately chose, to determine the best locations for the cameras. So probably, yes, having cameras at the gate would be an improvement, and that's where we were looking to make that improvement.
With the theft going on, with people stealing, wouldn't that have been your priority to hurry and get cameras to help take care of that problem?
With respect to your question, the first theft at that location that happened on my watch happened in July of 2019, 5 years into my tenure. There was a total of $4,700 stolen worth of equipment. In the overall big picture, and I'm not minimizing this, what I'm saying is sometimes you have risk and reward. We looked to improve our camera system when we realized it did not adequately do everything we wanted to do. I asked for the money, we got the money approved. However, the project manager had not completed the project yet. I am not trying to shirk that responsibility, but we all have different jobs, and that job was assigned to him. And unfortunately, it hadn't been completed yet at the time of the second theft.
Have y'all ever thought about blocking the gates with vehicles just like they do at car dealerships to keep from anybody driving in and driving out?
It had not been implemented, no.
Okay.
Because again, we had not run into any issues with that. And again, there's always something that can be done differently to improve. And that's why I say constant improvement. You come up with different ideas, that you try different things in order to make it better. So that could be used as a strategy. Absolutely.
My last question is, the people who have equipment on their truck, how you hold them accountable? How you know they bring them back in the afternoon? Who checks that?
The crew supervisors, there's several crew supervisors who are responsible for the operation of their crews and making sure that if there's any problems, that they report it to either me or the operations superintendent. In this case, it would have been Sam Smith.
Okay, that's all I have.
With that, I'm ready to move to a close. So, Counselor, would you like to go ahead and sum up your position?
Yes, Chairman. Thank everyone. I want to thank everyone for their time and their patience. I will try to keep this brief, but I'm going to end the same way I began. I said earlier today that the evidence would show a couple of things. One of the things I said was that the evidence would show that Mr. Hagner knew or should have known that the security cameras at the maintenance shop yard on Lumpkin Road were not functioning properly, if not completely non-functioning. Now, you've heard Mr. Hagner's testimony today. He's tried to make it very clear that the cameras were working, but the evidence that we have presented, the Augusta's business records, most of them being 2 of them coming from the risk management department, 1 coming from the sheriff's office, clearly indicate that it's not the case. Going back to, I'm going to share the screen back to this document, the risk management report in 2014. Even if Mr. Hagner contends he didn't know about this report, it still clearly states in the first paragraph, second sentence, the last sentence, the review was required due to numerous thefts of both personal and county vehicle and concerns of building security with a system that was taken out of service. This happened at the Lumpkin Road Recreation Facility Maintenance Area, the same facility we've been talking about all day. So it was clear in 2014 that there was an issue with the security systems, the security cameras not working. Let's fast forward back to present day. I will share the document that was presented to you in the employer's case in chief. Now, Mr. Hagner, he brought up this employee, Sam Smith, and this document dated Friday, July 24th, 2020, from Andy Oates, the risk manager, the risk management employee, the same employee that Mr. Hagner spoke highly of, indicated that in number 2 of his the email, that Mr. Smith indicated the camera system has not been functional since at least January. It was bought and installed by the Recreation Department, and there is no maintenance program for it. Sam said nobody was properly trained on the systems, its capabilities, video storage, use, etc. Once again, this is a document that shows that the camera system was not functioning correctly. Going back to my last document that I will refresh your memory with is the sheriff's report from the Richmond County Sheriff's Office. Now, Mr. Hagner wants you to believe, I don't know what he, contends that the sheriff's deputy told him, but in his narrative, he clearly says that there was no video evidence. Not that the video evidence was blurry or he couldn't make out a description, but that there is no video evidence. So looking at the totality of all the evidence, the documents, it's clear that there was an issue with the camera systems and they were not functioning properly. And they had at least not been functioning properly, at least since January. So I think it's clear that what Mr. Hagner is saying or wants this board to believe is simply not true. The security camera systems at the maintenance yard clearly was not functioning correctly. Another thing that supports that is that, yes, people steal. You cannot prevent that. But the fact that you would have 2 thefts at the same location within a 13-month period, and they walk away with $33,000 worth of equipment. But Mr. Hagner testified that the first theft that occurred in 2019, they stole about $5,000 worth of equipment. But then they got bolder and stole $28,000 worth of equipment. And even though it was all these procedures in place, but what seems more likely than not, the thieves, if you know there is no working security system, you probably would go back to the same location and keep stealing equipment. We've also showed that in light of these circumstances, Mr. Hagner did not take the necessary steps to ensure that the cameras were working properly. All Mr. Hagner had to do was at least make sure the cameras were working. So if people were going to steal our property that is paid with taxpayer dollars, that we would be able to catch those culprits. The evidence clearly has showed, I don't think anybody disputes, that approximately $33,000 worth of equipment was stolen once again at the same location that was under Mr. Hagner's supervision within a 13-month period. The evidence also showed that well, Mr. Hagner disputes this, but I think it's clear from the evidence that Mr. Hagner could not account for all of the inventory under his supervision prior to his termination, which was clear from the risk management report, where he said that only approximately 90% of the inventory could be accounted for. I think it's also clear, we've heard Mr. Hagner, provide his testimony today. He's constantly talked about other subordinates, other directors, other departments, and all of their responsibility and what they should have done. But he has never once taken just any accountability for the fact that he was a deputy director, that he is responsible for all these facilities under the Parks Division. And at the end of the day, $33,000 worth of equipment was stolen from a facility within a 13-month period, and no one can be held accountable. Just really to sum it up, I mean, today you did not just hear about one or two shortcomings of Mr. Hagner as a manager. Like, nobody's perfect, nobody makes mistakes. Even as Mr. Hagner pointed out, the termination letter that he was presented was, had 2 typos in it. But we're not asking Mr. Hagner to be perfect. What you've heard today was several shortcomings of Mr. Hagner as a manager. And you've heard the consequences of those shortcomings. Once again, the loss of $30,000 worth of Augusta property paid for by taxpayer money, for which the government cannot hold anyone accountable for because there's no working security cameras that could capture the thefts. I believe that we can all agree that managers and supervisors must be held to a higher standard within any organization. And I don't think that the organization is trying to hold Mr. Hagner to some standard that is unreasonable. And at some point, every manager must be held accountable. And if not, the organization cannot function. And for all of these reasons, we respectfully ask that the board uphold Mr. Hagner's termination.
Thank you, Counselor. Mr. Hagner, can you give me a quick wrap up, please, sir?
Yes, sir. So in response to that, cameras have been operational since I started here in 2014. They were operational in 2019 after a theft. We had good information from them. Their termination paperwork specifically has a total error in there that says cameras were not operable since 2014. That is simply not true. The cameras were working in 2019. The cameras were working in 2020. As noted, the monitor, after we realized that there was a problem with the monitor, that's the problem that was there. Once that monitor was resolved, the cameras were shown to be operational. They didn't, unfortunately, as Mr. McDowell said, we can't get anybody arrested from that. Well, I'm sorry, but there's cameras in a lot of places and there's thefts in a lot of places, and unfortunately, not every theft gets resolved. Now, I'm not happy about the fact that this happened. If given my job back, I will make sure that is a priority one to get that camera system that we had already worked on since 2019 to try to get an improvement made for our department in that specific location, that will be priority one in order to get this resolved. Going back to the inventory, I made an anecdotal statement to Mr. Oates that said approximately 90%. I'm not going to refute that. There's no accurate number there. It's a matter of there were several pieces of equipment that were still under the trying to figure out exactly where they were. Working with Miss Braswell in the fleet shop, things were picked up by other departments, as were several items that were in our care that we picked up by accident. So that happened on not a regular basis, but an infrequent basis, where the wrong piece of equipment may have been picked up by a department and they took it to their shop. We were trying to work on that even as I was being let out the door. That was an ongoing issue with at least one Gravely mower and several smaller pieces of equipment. So when I said 90%, it's probably 98%. We did the inventory literally in November, completed it at that time. We'll be completing another inventory at the end of this year after the mowing season's complete. And that would be, again, one of the first things that would be happening upon my return. So given that, I mean, I ask, for your use of common sense here, that realistically there's work to be done. And I am looking forward to doing that work.
Thank you, Mr. Hagner. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and close the hearing and entertain a motion from the board.
I make a motion that we go into legal session.
I have a motion to go into legal session. Do I have a second?
A second.
I have a motion. I have a first and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Yeah.
Aye.
Aye.
Good.
Aye.
In the boardroom, you guys are muted.
Okay, Mr. Barbie, are you ready to go into legal session
Yes, I am. Thank
or
you.
closed session? Okay.
Yeah, closed session.
If everybody will just stand by, you'll be taken into a closed room. Hold on one second.
Thank you.
I thank you for your time today, sir, and for all of the commission and their time today.
Thank you.
I'm back in the meeting. I apologize. I was understanding that I was not supposed to stay on.
Yeah, you can, Gary, this is Jeff with IT. You can stay on. I would just mute because you're able to be seen publicly right now on YouTube. So just mute your device, and then when they all come back to the floor, they'll be in here with you.
Thank you.
All right. So, all right, we're back. So I'm going to entertain a motion. I'm going to entertain a motion for us to come out of legal session.
I make a motion that we come out of legal section.
I get a second.
Says it.
Any objection? Hearing no objection, I move we are out of legal session. Now I need another motion from I'd like another motion from the floor regarding this matter.
I make a motion.
Oh, I'm sorry, JR. I'm
Go
just
ahead.
coming back. My internet went out.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So I'm just coming back to the meeting.
I make a motion that we have a roll vote to
Okay. All right. Anybody got can I get a second with a roll call, or you want to just do a roll call vote?
I second.
Well, no, I need a motion. I made a motion, JR, of what you want.
I make a motion that we do a roll call vote.
Well, no, I need a motion for, are you upholding or
I make a motion that uphold the administration
Termination.
decision.
Okay. Do we have a second?
I second.
Okay. I hear a motion to uphold and a second to uphold from to uphold the city's termination. I'll go to a roll call vote. I'll start in here. Mr. Atkins.
Opposed.
Mr. Atkins votes yes to uphold. Mr. Atkins, you voted yes to uphold?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Masters?
Not to uphold.
No. Mr. Masters votes no. Yes, sir. I apologize. I didn't get your name.
Culver.
Culver, Mr. Culver. Mr. Culver.
To uphold.
Yes to uphold. Okay. Gwen.
Yes, to uphold the decision made to terminate.
Okay. Votes yes. JR.
Yes. Yes to uphold.
Yes to uphold. Aisha.
Yes to uphold.
Yes to uphold. Kenneth Bonds. Mr. Bonds.
Yes to uphold.
Yes. Chip Barbie, the chairman. I'm going to vote yes to uphold. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I have 7 yeses and 1 no. The motion to uphold carries.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I make a motion that we amend. Hold on.
Go out of session.
Yeah.
I've got a motion to adjourn.
Adjourn. Yeah.
Okay. Do I have a second?
I second.
Okay. Anybody object? Hearing no objections, I want to thank y'all very much for.
Know where you are.
Say what?
All right.
I said, where are you?
I am in my home office. hearing no objections, I'm going to move that we go ahead and adjourn. I appreciate y'all's time with this today.
All right. Happy
Very
Thanksgiving and happy Christmas.
Yeah, thank y'all very much.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Thank you. Take care.
Mr. Barbie,
Yes, ma'am.
we got another meeting to schedule. I'll give you a call.